The spatula was still in my hand when I heard it. Kids were laughing. A football arced across the grass, and smoke curled off the grill in lazy ribbons. My niece, Ellie, had just asked if I'd bring the same mustard for her birthday cookout. I smiled and nodded, said something like, "Only if you promise not to turn 10 again." She giggled. My other niece tugged at my pant leg. She wanted the first burger. Then I heard her voice. Marianne, on the porch, talking too loudly into her phone. Not loud like angry, loud like drunk on attention, the way she got when she was performing for someone she missed, someone she thought she could impress. "I can't stand him sometimes," she said. A pause, then laughter. He's good with kids, sure. But it's like living with a schoolteacher. Everything has a lesson. He folds towels with corners." Another pause. Her tone softened. "I still love you. I didn't burn the burgers. I turned the heat down like I always do once they're close." I nodded when Ellie asked for ketchup. I passed it over. Smiled. I flipped the burgers for everyone else. I served the adults on paper plates. My brother-in-law still doesn't like coleslaw, so I left it off his. Marianne came back inside 20 minutes later, humming like nothing had happened. Like I hadn't heard her say she loved another man with the same mouth she used to kiss me goodbye every morning. She asked me if the potato salad had enough paprika. I said, "Tastes just fine." And I meant it. The food was good. The lies were bitter. That night, she fell asleep on the couch watching her usual show, some true crime nonsense she pretended to understand because she liked the accents. I sat next to her a while. I watched her breathe. Then I stood up, walked upstairs, and packed one duffel bag. Took only what I needed. No dramatic slamming of drawers. No stomping. I left my wedding band on the dresser. Not because I wanted her to see it. Just because it didn't belong to me anymore. I found a scrap of notepad paper from the kitchen drawer. The kind we use for grocery lists and reminders to buy batteries. I wrote 5 words. "Don't worry. I heard enough." I folded it once, clean and square, and slid it under her phone. Then I locked the door behind me and stepped into the night. The funny thing? I wasn't angry. Not even sad, really. I just felt awake. Like a fog had been lifted. Not because she'd betrayed me. That would have been too simple. No, it was the casualness of it. The way she said it. He's good with kids, like it was a flaw. Like being kind, consistent, boringly reliable, like that was the problem. She used my decency as the punchline to her love story with someone else. That's what did it. She didn't just cheat. She weaponized my goodness. And that meant she never really saw me. She saw a role I filled. A background character who paid for Christmas gifts, remembered birthdays, and offered to babysit her sister's twins so she could have spa days. I was a spreadsheet in khakis. And she'd outgrown the budget. The thing is, she never asked how the money got there. How the business she bragged about to everyone was actually built. Who filed the first registration? Who made sure her coaching brand passed compliance? Who signed the early investor paperwork because her credit was garbage from the divorce before me? Who paid for the marketing agency? Who let her use his consulting firm to filter the first round of anonymous funding so her ex-husband wouldn't know she was building an empire? She thought kindness meant weakness. She thought quiet meant stupid. But I'd written every check. I'd signed every clause. I had built the box she lived in. And she never even noticed which key fit the lock. I wasn't leaving out of heartbreak. I was leaving to begin. And the moment that door clicked behind me, I wasn't Paul the husband anymore. I was Paul, the proxy, the founder, the name on the paperwork. And that meant she was the one who should start panicking. She just didn't know it yet. The apartment smelled like old varnish and quiet. No pictures on the walls, no wine rack, no ridiculous Himalayan salt lamp glowing like a smug little crystal next to our TV. Just beige carpet, a navy couch, and a bed that didn't sag in the middle. That was enough. I dropped my bag by the door, opened the windows, and stood for a minute in the breeze. It wasn't relief I felt, it was clarity. The kind that settles in after the fog lifts and the map starts to show details you hadn't noticed before. Like the fact that you've been carrying the whole damn thing alone and smiling like it was a mutual effort. At 8:15 a.m., I buttoned my collar, grabbed the manila folder from my duffel, and drove across town to the office park with the mirrored windows. My name, Paul A. Westmere, was still etched on the frosted glass of Suite 304. Westmere Consulting had never been more than 5 employees. We were lean. We were quiet. We were useful. I greeted Mara at reception. She blinked in surprise. "Paul, need you to prep files for Robert," I said, tapping the folder. "It's time." Mara didn't ask questions. That's why I hired her. Within 20 minutes, I was sitting across from my attorney in the small conference room. The one with the ugly painting Marianne had always said clashed with the chairs. I kept it anyway. I liked the discomfort it caused her. Robert raised an eyebrow as he flipped through the folder. You sure about this? Every page. He read a few lines in silence, then whistled low. She never knew? No. You do realize how deep this runs, right? I nodded. That's the point. We started signing. What most people didn't know about Marianne's company, True North Coaching, with its breezy font and vague empowerment slogans, is that it wasn't hers. Not legally. Not originally. She had the face, the charm, the voice made for podcasts and keynotes and Instagram reels, sure. But she didn't want her name on the early contracts. Too risky, she said. Her ex might find out. Her taxes weren't clean. The first round of funding was not exactly conventional. She needed a clean channel. So I created one. Westmere Consulting became that channel. I filed the LLC. I paid the initial state fees. I leased the office space under my name. I opened the escrow accounts, signed the non-disclosures, fronted the payments to the web developers, and filtered the first $150,000 through Westmere's shell. She was the performer. I was the architect. And now? Now I was the fire marshal, walking through the funhouse she'd decorated with candles, preparing to turn off the oxygen. The documents we signed that morning were surgical. Termination of proxy permissions, revocation of signing rights, reversion of intellectual property back to originating partner. That last clause, hidden in an addendum Marianne initialed 2 years ago on the back of a licensing agreement, after I told her it was just formal language for insurance compliance. She didn't read it. She just signed and asked if I could make the font on her signature logo a little more uplifting. Now that clause was my scalpel. When the last signature was dry, Robert slid the papers back into the folder. Do you want me to notify her legal team? Not yet, I said. She'll find out quickly. Once the payment system goes offline, she'll call someone. I know. He stared at me. You're not doing this out of spite, Paul. That's what's so damn chilling. I smiled. Spite would be louder. Before I left, I walked down the hallway past our records room. Inside were the original filings, the first licensing papers, and Marianne's onboarding videos, all backed up and time-stamped, stored under secure Westmere channels. Every speech she gave, every slideshow she pitched, every workbook she sold, watermarked, technically, with our back-end IP. Marianne always said she loved the freedom of being an entrepreneur. She never asked who paid for it, or who made it legal. So when she told her ex, I still love you, and brushed me off like some boring, benevolent chauffeur, she had no idea she was spitting on the man who owned her brakes. It wasn't about punishing her. It was about removing myself from a system I built for someone who never thought to ask if I wanted to stay in it. And when she finally realized what she lost, it wouldn't be her marriage. It would be her entire identity. Marianne woke up with a dry mouth and a mild headache. She had fallen asleep on the couch again, laptop still open on her thighs, one hand tucked under her cheek, the other hanging off the side, wedding ring glinting dully in the early morning light. She didn't remember turning off the TV. Didn't remember Paul coming to bed, either. Not that she cared. They'd been off for months. A few nights on the couch was practically a mutual agreement at this point. She stretched, rolled her neck, and walked barefoot into the kitchen. The house was still, quiet in that particular way that felt more like absence than peace. Paul's slippers weren't by the door. His keys weren't in the bowl. His favorite mug wasn't in the drying rack. She shrugged. Probably sulking somewhere. Maybe he'd gone to his brother's, or one of those little motels he used to recommend to friends passing through. She poured herself coffee and leaned against the kitchen island. Opened her phone. One text, already typed and waiting in her drafts from the night before. She hit send. All good. He left. Sent to a number labeled Do Not Answer. Huh. Followed by 3 emojis and a heart. She smiled to herself. The ex had been calling again, all sweet and apologetic lately, as if 10 years of silence could be erased by a few I still think about you lines and half a memory of their college road trips. Marianne wasn't naive. She knew what it was, nostalgia and ego. But it felt good to be wanted, especially when Paul looked at her lately like she was just another task to complete between emails. The coffee burned her tongue. She didn't care. Her phone rang. She frowned. It was Natalie, her assistant. Hey, Marianne answered. It's Sunday. You okay? Sorry, Natalie said quickly. But I just tried to log into the funding portal. Everything's frozen. What do you mean, frozen? Like, I'm locked out. It says administrator rights revoked. Same with the CRM. My credentials don't work. Okay, Marianne muttered, setting the coffee down. I'll check. She padded back to the couch, opened her laptop, and refreshed her email. 57 unread. That wasn't unusual. She often let things pile up over the weekend. But the subject lines? They made her sit up straighter. Notice of administrative access change. Westmere Holdings. Trademark update. Reassignment of use rights filed. Alert. Payment gateways suspended pending verification. Your admin credentials have been modified. Her heart stuttered. She clicked, skimmed, clicked again. All official. All time-stamped in the last 12 hours. No one from her team had access anymore. Not her, not Natalie, not her marketing lead, not even the IT contractor she paid through Venmo. She reopened her browser, logged into her primary dashboard, TrueNorth's central hub. 404 error. She tried the backup. Access denied. Contact your administrator. She blinked. Administrator? She was the administrator. Wasn't she? Her mind raced for answers. Maybe a system crash? Maybe the hosting expired? No, she had auto-renew set. Maybe a hack. She checked the IP logs, something Paul had taught her once in passing. She never bothered before. She didn't need to. That was his realm. The boring stuff. The back end. The most recent logins were from a Westmere IP. Same town. Same suite number. Her mouth went dry. She dialed Natalie back. Try the invoice software. See if that still works. A pause. Then, it's gone. Redirects to some new portal. Says TrueNorth Holdings, a Westmere brand. Marianne stood slowly. She crossed the room and looked out the window. It was a beautiful morning. Clear, crisp. Birds chirping. A woman jogged by with her golden retriever. The world had no idea it was shifting beneath her feet. But she still didn't panic. She opened her calendar, saw her scheduled live stream for next Thursday, still there. She had her big coaching call next weekend. Maybe it was just an update gone wrong. A permissions issue. Probably a glitch, she muttered. She refreshed the page. Error 401, unauthorized. Her reflection stared back at her in the black screen. For a brief second, she thought she saw Paul's face behind hers. But when she turned around, the house was still empty. And that's when something subtle, nearly imperceptible, began to tick at the back of her skull. Not panic, not yet. Just a whisper of something she couldn't explain. Like a chair, moved an inch. Like a painting hung, just a little crooked. Something had shifted. But she had no idea how deep the shift went. Not yet. The call came in from an unfamiliar number, just as Marianne was halfway through an emergency email to her graphic designer. She nearly declined it, figuring it was spam or another bot trying to get her to upgrade her podcast platform plan. But something about the area code made her hesitate. Connecticut. Her lawyer's office. She answered. Marianne. Greg's voice was already halfway to yelling. Greg, what the hell did you do? She blinked. What? I just got a notice from Westmere Holdings. Your husband filed a full revocation of authority. The funding accounts, the licensing, the business trademarks, it's all shifted under his exclusive control. She froze. Wait, what are you talking about? Paul doesn't run anything. I'm the CEO. No, you're not, he snapped. Not anymore. You handed him full signing rights 2 years ago, remember? During that investor onboarding round you wanted to keep quiet? Her hand gripped the edge of the desk. That was just paperwork. He said it was temporary. Greg barked a short laugh that didn't sound like amusement. You initialed a legal proxy agreement, Marianne. It was notarized. I have it in front of me. Her mouth opened. Closed. Her throat felt tight. He's just my husband, she managed. No, Greg said flatly. He was your legal fallback. And apparently, your foundational signatory. That man is the backbone of your entire business. Without his signature, the whole house collapses. She tried to speak. Nothing came out. Greg didn't wait. He just triggered a clause that returns all IP, licensing, and payment permissions to the originating proxy. That's him. Do you understand what that means? I didn't think he'd actually. Greg shouted now. You didn't read. You didn't ask. You let him build this damn structure, and now you're shocked he knows how to dismantle it. You're not authorized on anything anymore. She stumbled back from her desk chair like it had electrocuted her. Her legs knocked into the kitchen stool and sent it skidding across the tile. Her heart slammed against her chest. Not a flutter, but a thud. Real. Loud. Cold. Greg, she whispered. Can we reverse it? There was silence on the other end. Then, not unless he agrees to. And he wouldn't. She knew that now. Paul didn't yell. He didn't curse or throw things or leave threatening notes. He left 5 words. Don't worry. I heard enough. She had mistaken stillness for weakness. Silence for submission. Her phone buzzed. Another email alert. Your domain ownership has been transferred. If you believe this was an error, please contact the legal representative of the new owner, Westmere Holdings. She stared at the screen. Greg, she said again, voice cracking. What can I do? I don't know, he said quietly now. You married a man who's better at business than you ever realized. And you made him invisible. You gave him the keys and forgot he had them. I thought he just wanted to help. Well, he did. Until he didn't. And now? He's not helping anymore. He's owning. She ended the call and stood there, alone in her designer kitchen, beneath a pendant light she used to brag about on interior podcasts. The marble counters, the eco-friendly wood grain cabinets, the matte black fixtures, all of it suddenly felt like a stage set. Her life wasn't crumbling. It had already been reassigned. Paul didn't just walk out. He walked in, to everything she thought was hers. And the worst part? She signed it all away. Blind. Rushed. Arrogant. Because he cooked breakfast. Because he liked kids. Because he never raised his voice. She laughed at him like he was the help. Turns out, he was the landlord. Marianne tore open the hall closet like a woman searching for oxygen. Scarves, old laptop bags, tax folders, an unopened box labeled holiday pillows spilled onto the floor. She didn't care. She dropped to her knees, wrenching free the fireproof case she hadn't opened in almost 2 years. Inside, her important binder, labeled in faux gold script, True North Legal and Compliance. She yanked it out like it had insulted her and slammed it onto the kitchen table. Pages flapped. Sticky tabs bent and curled. Somewhere in this mess was the answer. Or the trap. Maybe both. Greg's voice crackled through her speakerphone. He was still on the line. Still flipping through scanned PDFs she hadn't read since she first signed them. Marianne. Page 17. Look for an addendum. Title should read something like IP Contingency Authorization. She flipped. Faster. Then slower. Her heart thumped so loudly she could hear it in her ears. Louder than Greg. Louder than the wind rattling the front door. There. Page 17. She froze. It wasn't typed in standard legalese. It was Paul's formatting. She recognized it instantly. Clean. Subtle. Quietly binding. In the event of dissolution, separation, or extended proxy disengagement, full brand control, digital property rights, and fiduciary signatory authority shall revert to the originating proxy signatory under the terms of initial incorporation. She stared. Greg, she whispered, what does that mean? It means, he said, almost gently now. Paul built in a kill switch. Her eyes dropped to the signature line. There it was. Her loopy initials. MLP. She'd signed it during that week-long, empowered women's retreat in Santa Fe. The one with the vision boards and herbal detoxes and the laughably expensive yoga mats. Paul had emailed her a few forms to sign, said they were just contingency clauses for state compliance. She hadn't read them. She was too busy branding herself as a thought leader on boundaries and balance. And now? Now she didn't own her own name. Her fingers trembled as she flipped back to the index. Another clause, on page 22, sealed the deal. Trademark usage shall be considered non-transferable post-reversion. Greg, she said, voice raw, this includes my logo? Yes. My slogan? Yes. My website? All of it. Her jaw clenched. He can't just take everything. Greg's reply was sharp. He didn't take it, Marianne. You gave it to him. You just didn't bother to look at the receipt. She stared down at the document, at her own handwriting, a little sloppy, rushed, the ink slightly smudged from the poolside cocktail she'd spilled while filling it out. There was even a pineapple ring stain in the margin. The stain had more permanence than her business. She ran to her laptop, logged in again, still blocked. She typed the original domain into the browser. It redirected instantly. Welcome to Westmere Elevate. Leadership coaching for people who actually read the fine print. A new logo. Sleek. Sharp. Black and gold. Vaguely familiar, like it had grown out of hers, but more polished. More deliberate. And beneath it, a tagline. Founded by the architect of True North's original framework. She slammed the lid shut. Greg spoke again, voice grim. We can try to challenge it, but unless we prove coercion or fraud, that clause is airtight. I've seen cleaner prenups get torn apart in court. This isn't one of them. She laughed. It came out bitter. So I lost everything because I trusted my husband. No, Greg said. You lost everything because you treated your husband like an assistant. And assistants don't usually have the power to shut off the building. But Paul, he built it. She sat back in her chair. Not crying. Not yet. But close. The terrifying thing wasn't that Paul had prepared for this. It was that he had prepared quietly. Like a man who didn't need credit. Only control. The kind that doesn't yell. Doesn't gloat. Just waits. And then moves. Marian stared at the binder, The crooked, sticky tabs, the pineapple stain, the echoes of her past arrogance pressed between laminated sheets. She thought she was clever. She thought she'd outgrown him. She never realized the floorboards creaked because he installed them that way. So when the collapse came, it wasn't loud. It was designed. The glass doors hissed open, and Marian stepped into the boardroom like she still owned something. Like her name hadn't just been carved off the masthead of her own damn ship. She wore her power blazer, the navy one with the high collar and subtle gold threading. The one that made her look like a headline. She didn't wait for greetings. Didn't even make eye contact. She walked straight to the end of the table, heels clicking with purpose. "Let's clear the air," she said, tossing her handbag down like a gavel. There's been some confusion. A technical misalignment. 3 of the investors exchanged glances. Not hostile. Not friendly, either. Just restrained. "You've all seen the emails," she continued, opening her laptop with practiced ease. "There's been a series of permissions issues. But I'm here to assure you, True North remains fully operational, and any temporary changes will be reversed within the week." "Will they?" a voice asked, low and familiar. Her stomach dropped before she looked. Paul, sitting at the far end, in a gray suit. No tie. Calm. Like he'd been there for an hour sipping tea and solving calculus. There was a portfolio open in front of him, neatly tabbed, color-coded. She recognized the binder, his system. "Paul," she said coolly, "this isn't your space." He nodded slightly, almost polite. "That's what I wanted to clarify." She bristled. "This meeting is with my investors." "Our investors," he corrected, without raising his voice. Then he turned to the others. "Apologies for the drama, but you deserve clarity." He tapped a tablet. The screen behind him flickered to life, displaying an organizational chart so clean it could have been printed in surgical ink. "The True North framework was registered under Westmere Holdings," he said, gesturing with a laser pointer like he was giving a quarterly review. "A layered model, utilizing 3 shell companies for IP protection, 2 discretionary funding accounts with staggered liquidity, and a compliance umbrella tied to my consulting firm." He paused. "All of which were approved, signed, and initialed by Marianne, who, at the time, wanted deniability." Her mouth opened, closed. She tried to cut in, but he kept going. "These measures were designed to protect the brand in case of scrutiny, divorce, litigation, PR failure. Marianne wanted flexibility. I gave her stability. In exchange, she delegated control." The screen changed again, scans of signed documents. Her initials, her signature, her own checklist marked, reviewed. One investor, a woman with silver glasses and a sharper mind than Marianne had ever credited, raised her hand. "Mr. Westmere, are you saying you've held legal control this entire time?" Paul gave a small smile. "Control, no. Responsibility, yes. Until now." Another investor murmured. "So, she was just the brand. He was the architect." Marianne slammed her palm on the table. "I built this with you." Paul finally looked at her. "No," he said. Calm. Cold. "You performed. You spoke. You sold. But you never looked under the hood. You never even asked what powered it." Her eyes darted around the table. Not a single ally in sight. "You're making me look incompetent," she said. "Too sharp." "I'm making you look accurate," he replied. A silence fell, the kind that wraps a room like a verdict. She clenched her jaw. "This was a partnership. You were opportunistic," Paul said. "I was supportive. I let you shine. You used that light to cast shadows." She turned on her heel and left the room. But not before hearing the oldest investor lean toward Paul and mutter, "Smart man." Quiet, but sharp. The door shut behind her with a click that echoed louder than any argument. She kept walking. Past the assistant's desk, past the sleek elevator bank, past the floor-to-ceiling windows that had once made her feel invincible. Her reflection stared back at her in the glass. The blazer looked expensive, but it didn't look like armor anymore. It looked like a costume, and everyone had just seen the zipper. Marian hadn't cried in years. Not at her father's funeral. Not when she'd crashed her old Prius into a guardrail. Not even when her first business failed, and she had to move back in with her mother for 3 humiliating months. But now, sitting on the edge of her designer bed in a $4,800 mattress that still hadn't paid for itself in sleep, her eyes stung and her hands shook as she tapped Rachel, ride or die, in her contacts. Rachel had been her best friend since undergrad. They'd done everything together, startups, seminars, even the silent treatment packed against that one influencer who stole Rachel's bootcamp slides. Marian trusted her like she trusted caffeine. She picked up on the third ring. "Ratch." Thank God. There was a pause. No laughter. No, hey girl. Just breathing. I need help, Marian said, cutting the pleasantries. They're saying Paul owns everything. Another pause. Then Rachel replied, her voice flat. Yeah, I know. Marian blinked. Wait, what do you mean you know? I got a message from his office, Rachel said. Yesterday. What kind of message? A proposal. For what? Marian snapped. To join Westmere Elevate, Rachel said. Operations director. With equity. Marianne went silent. The walls seemed to hum around her. That couldn't be real. Rachel was her partner, her hype woman, her unofficial CMO. She'd done every podcast intro, managed the email lists, even helped Marian ghostwrite some of her book blurbs. Rachel was True North's inner circle. I haven't accepted, Rachel added quickly. But you're considering it? Marian whispered. There was a long breath on the other end of the line. And then, you told me Paul was spineless. A background character. Just a guy who did taxes and made pancakes. Turns out, he was building the firewall. He blindsided me. Marian said, her voice rising. He manipulated everything behind my back. No, Rachel corrected softly. You asked him to do that. You just never thought he'd keep the keys. Marian stood up, pacing now. This is ridiculous. You're not seriously thinking about working with him. I'm thinking about surviving, Rachel said. He's offering stability. You're offering damage control. Are you kidding me? Rachel sighed. Marian, your brand is gone. Your platforms are locked. Your last email blast had a 0.4% open rate. You're hemorrhaging credibility. You're supposed to be on my side, Marianne said, jaw clenched. I was, Rachel said, voice cold now. But you used me like you used Paul. You wanted loyalty without transparency. That doesn't work when the lights come on. A ding came through. Email notification. Marianne opened it reflexively. Subject, forwarded message. From Rachel A. To Marianne L. Prescott. Attachment, offer_letter_Westmere Elevate.pdf. Her knees buckled slightly. You sent me the offer, she said hoarsely. You should see what a real power play looks like, Rachel replied. He didn't scream. He didn't threaten. He just delivered results. Maybe you could have done the same. If you hadn't treated the smartest person in the room like he was lucky just to be standing near you. Marian wanted to scream, wanted to throw the phone, but instead she sat, perfectly still, as her world cracked again, not from impact, but from erosion. One piece at a time. Rachel cleared her throat. He said I could help design the new leadership curriculum. From scratch. You're going to replace me. Rachel didn't answer that, which said everything. Click. The call ended. Marian stared at her phone. The screen dimmed. The silence was different now. Not clean, not full of potential, but hollow. Like the echo after a house is packed up and the movers are gone. Her best friend wasn't just walking away. She was walking toward Paul. And somehow, impossibly, it made sense. Because Paul had never asked for credit. Just trust. And now, he had both. While Marian had what? A blazer that didn't protect her. A name she no longer owned. And a friend who'd realized too late that power isn't about the stage. It's about who built the damn spotlight. The ring light was on. The mic was positioned exactly how she liked it. Angled slightly upward to soften her jawline. Marianne adjusted her blouse, dabbed a touch of concealer beneath her eyes, and took a steadying breath. This live stream was her shot to reclaim the narrative. Spin control. She'd done it before. Pivoted from worse. All she needed was 5 minutes of clarity and confidence, and the tide would start to turn. She opened her laptop. Clicked the icon for her streaming platform. Login screen. Strange. She always stayed signed in. She typed her credentials. Email. Password. Access denied. She blinked. Retried. Triple-checked the password. Access denied. A red bar flashed across the screen. Your account has been deactivated. For questions, contact your administrator. Her heart gave a small, uncertain stutter. She opened her calendar app. That, too, asked for credentials. She tried the same once. Another denial. Then a new message popped up. This user is no longer assigned to any projects. She stood up, knocking over her chair in the process. Her pulse spiked. Her ears rang. She stormed to her desktop and opened her browser. Typed in her domain, truenorthleadership.com. It loaded. Just not her site. The familiar fonts were gone. The color scheme, her sage green and gold, was replaced with charcoal and white. A woman she didn't recognize smiled confidently from the homepage. Younger, ethnically ambiguous, corporate polished. And at the top, in a sleek new logo, Westmere Elevate. Her jaw dropped. The tagline made her stumble back like it had slapped her. Leadership isn't performance. It's architecture. She scrolled in disbelief. Her blog? Gone. Her contact form? Replaced. Her videos? Deleted. Every trace of her had been scrubbed. She scrambled for her phone and dialed the customer service number tied to her old hosting account. A chipper voice answered after 2 rings. Hi. Thank you for calling Host Fusion Support. How can I assist you? This is Marianne Prescott, she snapped. I need to access my domain. I was just locked out of my admin panel, and I need. One moment. A pause. Typing. Yes. That domain was transferred last week to Westmere Holdings. They're the new registered owner on file. Marianne's breath caught. No, she said slowly. That domain is mine. It's my name. My business. I understand, ma'am, but the transfer was completed with all the proper verification. I can send you the documentation if you'd like. I founded that brand, she shrieked. You can't just hand it off like it's an Amazon return. That's my face on every. Well, the support rep said cautiously, it appears your face is no longer associated with the brand. It's part of the rebranding strategy Westmere initiated. Marianne hung up without another word. Moments later, her inbox pinged. Subject, licensing violation, urgent. From moderation@contentdeck.io. She opened it with shaking fingers. Dear Ms. Prescott, per the original licensing agreement filed under Westmere Holdings, your likeness, voice, and image were licensed for exclusive use under the True North brand. Due to the reversion of ownership, you are no longer authorized to monetize or redistribute content featuring your image or voice recorded between 2020 to 2023. Continued use will constitute a breach of contract and may trigger formal takedown procedures. We thank you for your past contributions. Content Deck Legal Compliance Team. She stared at the words until they blurred. Her voice was no longer hers. She had filmed over 300 videos, poured her life into weekly Empowerment Mondays, Vision Sundays, guest interviews, 5-part mini-series on boundary setting, trauma healing, leadership language. All gone. Scrubbed. Reassigned. Rebranded. She clicked one last link, an old YouTube upload she had bookmarked. One of her most popular episodes. 48K views. It had gone semi-viral last fall. A black screen appeared. This video is no longer available. The content owner has removed it. She screamed. A raw, guttural noise tore out of her, bouncing off the marble countertops and echoing through the empty, perfect home. The home Paul had helped her buy. The one he told her to list under a shell company for asset security. The one she now realized might be sitting in a portfolio she never actually read. She fell to her knees. Not in tears. In silence. Because even that had been taken. Paul didn't ruin her. He deleted her. She sat in her car long after the engine had cooled, the heat from the dashboard long gone. Parked outside the studio space that used to be hers, now with fresh signage reading Westmere Elevate in backlit steel. Marianne stared at the dim windows like they might flicker back to life and let her in. They didn't. The glass didn't recognize her anymore. No keycard. No welcome code. No title. She pulled out her phone, thumbs trembling. Opened her messages. Scrolled past the emails from moderators, the notification from her bank that her business account was suspended, the bland LinkedIn rejection from a former intern who now worked for one of her ex-clients. She landed on the thread she hadn't opened since last week. Do not answer, huh? She hesitated, then typed. Can we talk? Nothing. She waited 5 minutes. Refreshed. Nothing. No typing bubble. No read receipt. No answer. She tried calling. Straight to voicemail. The recorded voice didn't even say his name. Just the default carrier line. She opened her phone settings. Checked the carrier info. Nothing listed. Confused, she tapped into her billing portal. The screen flashed red. Account closed. She tried her credit card. Declined. She tried another. Declined again. She stared at the phone in her hand. It hit her like a wave breaking over the back of her skull. Paul had been paying the bill. The family plan, the corporate card tied to it, the data plan, the backup storage, even the podcast cloud subscription. He had set all of it up. Because he was good with that stuff. Because she was too busy to deal with the tech side. Because he always just took care of it. And now? Now her phone was a brick with a camera. She threw it into the passenger seat. Fought the scream building in her throat. Then the ringtone startled her. Greg. Her lawyer. She answered. No hello. No greeting. Just his voice, quiet. Final. I spoke with counsel for Westmere Holdings. Her hands clutched the steering wheel like she was trying to wring water from it. And there's no movement. He's not budging. She swallowed. There's nothing we can use. We've looked. The contracts were valid. The initial proxy agreement was fully notarized. The IP reversion clause, ironclad. The ownership transfer documents are flawless. I even hired a second compliance analyst to find a breach. There isn't one. She said nothing. Greg continued, voice stripped of urgency. Unless he voluntarily returns ownership, we're done. She stared out at the street. Her old parking spot was occupied by someone else's car. A new badge sat on the receptionist's desk through the window. A framed photo of the new team, without her. She whispered, he won't. Greg said nothing. Then, softly, I'll send the final summary this afternoon. Click. Call ended. That was it. Her company, gone. Her name, erased. Her allies, turned. Her assets, locked. Her public persona, scrubbed. Her phone, disconnected. And Paul, still silent. Still calm. Still in control. She hadn't seen him once. Not in person. Not even in passing. Just shadows of him. Through forwarded emails, system logs, legal letters written with surgical precision. No threats. No insults. Just clean exits and airtight documentation. She had mocked him for folding towels with perfect corners. For labeling files in color-coded folders. For being too gentle, too predictable, too soft. But Paul had never been soft. He was precise. She had underestimated the man who never demanded attention because he didn't need it. She mistook stillness for passivity, structure for dullness. And now she lived in the ruin of her own performance. She didn't even know how to file unemployment. He used to handle that stuff. She sat there, stunned, until the sun dipped below the building. And then, finally, she muttered to no one at all. Who was I without him? And for the first time, she didn't have an answer. The applause was polite, not thunderous, but steady, clean and respectful, the kind that doesn't come from obligation, but from people who actually listened. Paul stepped back from the podium, adjusting his cuffs with a small, absent motion. The microphone clicked off behind him. The banner overhead read, Ethics in Business, Control, Compliance, and the Quiet Architect. It wasn't a flashy panel. No TED Talk lighting. No big stage theatrics. Just a well-lit conference room in a modest hotel. A few dozen chairs filled with founders, investors, and legal consultants who'd seen too many startups implode and wanted to hear how one managed to shed a co-founder mid-flight and still survive. Or rather, how he managed it. The moderator smiled as Paul stepped down. A masterclass in quiet leverage, she said into the mic. Thank you, Mr. Westmere. He nodded once, tucked his notes into his leather folder, and walked off stage. He hadn't spoken about Mary Ann by name. Hadn't needed to. The case study was already circulating in legal newsletters. How Westmere Holdings had executed one of the fastest IP consolidations and brand pivots in the last 2 years. Paul was now listed as the executive director of Westmere Elevate, which, in half a year, had not only retained 82% of TrueNorth's former clients, but expanded into enterprise coaching. He didn't need revenge. He had results. He paused near the refreshment table, letting the clink of coffee cups and low murmurs settle around him. Some attendees drifted over to ask a few questions. He answered them quietly, concisely, never rushed, never grandstanding. The man who had once been described, by his own wife, as too quiet to lead, now ran a company with 3 regional branches and a wait list for onboarding. He glanced toward the back of the room. She was there. Mary Ann. Alone. No assistant. No entourage. No blazer with sharp gold threading. She wore a gray cardigan and flats, like she had forgotten how to wear power. Her hair was tied back, her face drawn. No makeup, just the shape of someone who'd stopped fighting the mirror. Their eyes met. She didn't look away immediately, but she didn't smile either. He gave her a small, polite nod. Not cruel, not mocking, just acknowledgement. She lowered her eyes. She didn't move, didn't approach. She knew, instinctively, this wasn't her stage anymore. This wasn't a place she could reclaim with charm or spin. Here, she was a guest, barely that. A ghost in a room built by the man she'd erased from her story until he picked up the pen and wrote her out instead. Someone coughed behind her. She stood slowly, adjusted her bag, and slipped out the side door. No confrontation. No apology. Just exit. Paul watched her go. Not with triumph. Not with sorrow. With closure. It hadn't been personal, not in the way she probably thought. He hadn't set out to destroy her. He'd simply removed himself from the machine she ran with borrowed tools. And when he took back what was his, it wasn't destruction. It was balance. He turned back to the table, took a sip of lukewarm coffee. One of the younger attendees stepped forward, a notepad in hand. Mr. Westmere, do you think quiet leadership is underestimated in today's market? Paul smiled just slightly. It's not about volume, he said. It's about authorship. And with that, he left the room, leaving behind only the story. The one he finally got to tell.